What's the story, everyone? Welcome back to Gaelic Games Fan TV. How is the form? How are we all getting on? So, the All-Ireland Football Championship is concluded. The GA season is officially over. Just like that, it is done. It is dusted. We know Armagh are the All-Ireland champions. We know our provincial winners. We know how the story was settled in 2024. And so in this video, what we're going to be taking a look at is an end-of-season football power rankings. We are going to be ranking all 33 teams who have participated in Gaelic football at inter-county level, senior inter-county level in 2024. So we'll be looking at the 31 counties on the island of Ireland, and of course we won't be looking at Kilkenny because they don't have a football team, and you need to get that sorted, lads, for God's sake. I mean, come on, Kilkenny, at least have a football team. At least us Dubs could beat you at something, for fuck's sake. And of course you do have London and New York in the equation as well. If you're new to the channel, if you could hit the like button and subscribe, helps the YouTube channel grow, and we're trying to get it out there to more subscribers and everything else. And I do have some exciting plans coming very, very soon, so do stay tuned if you want to. Of course, do let me know in the comments down below your power rankings, and I'm sure, like a lot of these videos, there's going to be a huge amount of disagreements, and I absolutely love to see it because it's a bit of debate, and that's what you want in the world of Gaelic football. So let's get straight into it, and let's start off with 33, and I can't really be much of a surprise. It is New York, and I think for New York, like, when I was making this video, I kind of had one or two options. Number one was to leave them out of power rankings, and number two was to put them in at 33. And like, to be fair to New York, they get left out of enough things as it is, and I think if they got left out of my power rankings, you know, I think that would be an absolute insult, in my opinion. That would be a huge, huge insult. And I know there's no New York players that are watching this, but in case that there is, I'm having you in the power rankings, lads. And you know what? The thing about New York is, look, they were absolutely battered by Mayo. You can't really judge it. Like, two teams that are worlds apart, and why that game is even happening, I don't even know. But anyway, against Laois, they were very, very good. And like, they do have a couple of decent players within their team, and I think Mikey Brosnan in particular was one player that caught the eye, that has caught the eye over the last couple of seasons. But I think overall, like, the sample size is just so small with New York. If we could see them more, if they could be more involved within Gaelic football, it would just be great, wouldn't it? Like, if they had more inter-county games, if you could put them in the group stages of the Tailteann Cup, and in an ideal world, if you could throw them in Division 4 of the league, it would be absolutely brilliant. But of course, there's the logistical, reasons for why that can't probably happen. And of course, as well, financially, it would be an absolute nightmare for the GEA. And even for some of the players as well. Like, I mean, considering a lot of them, well, all of them live in New York. I mean, the fact that they would have to travel back for matches during the league in winter as well, in early January, February. Yeah, it just probably wouldn't work. But look, I think for New York, it would be great to see more for teams overseas, and whether they can do more and get other teams from America more involved. There's something of that nature. A junior football championship, I think, would be a great idea. New York in 33rd, and it is, I was going to say their neighbours. It's not their neighbours anyway, but it's definitely the closest team. Well, it's actually not the closest team to them. My geography is completely off, but it is the closest team to them on the power rankings. It is London. Do you know what I would love to see? New York versus London in like a one-off exhibition game. Who is the better side? Because I actually don't know, to be honest with you. Like, London, to be fair, they beat Offaly in the Tailteann Cup, and that was a resounding win, albeit Offaly looked like they could lose to absolutely anybody in the country at that point. But to be fair to London, like, they are making strides. Michael Maher's been there a long time, and like, fair play to him. Like, you think with all the sort of issues that London football has in terms of not having pitches to train on, huge amount of turnover in players, like, you would think that Michael Maher would want to step away from London, but he's sticking it out, and fair play to him. You have to give him a huge amount of credit. What are London actually expected to do? Probably very little. The fact they got a championship win on the board, their first since 2015, I think that's more than enough of a reason to put them in 32, and you could argue maybe they should be creeping above the likes of Waterford and Tip. Let me know in the comments down below. And it is Tipperary in 31st. The idea that Tipperary won a Munster championship in 2020, and then just what, 5 years later, they are the worst team in the island of Ireland. I mean, they wouldn't be if Kilkenny were around. I'm throwing so much shade at Kilkenny here. But in terms of the teams that are actually playing inter-county football, Tipperary are the worst team in the island of Ireland, which just doesn't sound right. And I think the reason for that is I do have Waterford in 30th. Waterford did beat Tipperary in the championship this year, so I don't think you can justify Tipperary being ahead of Waterford. What I would say about Tip is that Conor Sweeney obviously recently came back from an ACL injury. Will he be around next year? That's going to be interesting to see. Sean O'Connor was in now through injury, and obviously their manager as well, Paul Kelly, like he was in there for a year and then he left almost instantly. So it kind of makes me think that either he didn't really fancy it, or maybe there's a lot of problems within Tipperary football at the moment. I don't really know. But yeah, Tipperary in 31st, and we do have Waterford in 30th. 29th, it's Carlow. Like, if you're to look at certain teams, there's some teams who have probably gotten better, gotten worse. I think Carlow probably just stayed static. I can't remember what the power rankings were last year and where Carlow were, but to be honest with you, I doubt they were probably anywhere different from where they are now. Like, I think unfortunately for Carlow, it just is what it is. Like, you've got Paul Carew now, who I think is going to be leaving as well. Like, it's just, unfortunately, the Carlow rising days have officially gone. And like, they do have some decent players in there. Like, Dara Foley's a very good footballer. He's been a mainstay for Carlow for a good couple of years. But unfortunately, with a county which does have such limited resources, it's probably going to be, once every 30, 40 years you're going to get a decent team. So yeah, unfortunately for Carlow, we've got them in 29th. 28th is Longford, and like, this is one of them where I don't think Longford are as bad as this. Like, I don't think they're 28 out of 33 teams in the power rankings. Like, we're talking about Tipperary and how they've had a massive drop off, but like, it was only 2 or 3 years ago that Longford were battling to possibly get out of Division 3. Like, they were up there and they weren't a million miles off, and it just seems like since Paddy Christie has come in, they've gone, like, they've took an absolute nosedive and gone backwards. What's bizarre is that in the O'Byrne Cup, they play like Brazil. You know, they play like the best team we've ever seen. To be fair, that's probably, Brazil probably aren't that team anymore. I don't know who you would compare them to anymore. I don't really watch soccer that much. But Longford overall, they're just absolutely brilliant in the O'Byrne Cup. And then they get to the league and even the championship, and they just put in some very, very abject performances. And overall, a very, very disappointing season for Longford. Paddy Christie since left as well. Like, so many big players at times in now the side. Didn't really get to hear much of Darren Gallagher, who's usually their big player, and he has been over the last couple of seasons. Rian Brady doesn't really seem to be in the side either. I'm hoping from a Longford point of view that they can get the right manager in place next year and kick on. But I think on the basis of this season, you have to have them in 29th. I said 29th, I meant 28th. It was Carlow in 29th. Longford in 28th, and in 27th it is Wexford. And Wexford, like, they made progress from last year, and it mightn't sound like it given the fact that I have them in 27th, but I do think they're getting closer under John Hegarty. They are improving. They had some very good performances at times this year, and again they had some very impressive wins, and they were very, very unlucky to miss out on promotion. It obviously went down to that game against Leitrim and the sort of controversy that was surrounded around that. Like, they absolutely battered Longford in the final day of the league as well. They have some decent players, like Owen Nolan's a good player. You've also got Mark Ross there, who's knocked around. Ben Brosnan, of course, still like shooting the lights out. Actually not too sure if he's going to be there next season, but like, what an incredible servant he's been to Wexford football. They just couldn't make that step up, and unfortunately overall, it was probably a bit of a disappointing Tailteann Cup in some ways as well. So I think for Wexford, I've got them in 27. 26th is Limerick, and at one point of view, you would have had Limerick as, you know, probably down there with Waterford and Tipperary as some of the, you know, as one of the worst teams potentially in the country. Like, they went on an awful run in the last 2 years, like getting relegated in back-to-back league seasons. I think losing every game as well over the last 2 years. Like, a couple of decent performances in the Tailteann Cup last year, and again a couple of decent performances in the Tailteann Cup this year, which will certainly give Jimmy Lee and Limerick a bit more confidence going into next season. When Ian Corbett's back and when Danny Neville's back in the side, as we saw in the latter part of the Tailteann Cup, they are a decent team. They got up to Division 2 for a reason, lads. Like, they're not a bad team, and I think, to be honest with you, I would fancy Limerick to get out of Division 4 at this early stage as of right now. But one thing is for certain, they need to start winning matches and building up confidence, especially in the league. But overall, Limerick in 26th. It's Leitrim in 25th. They did get promoted under Andy Moran, and that was the most important thing from their point of view. Interesting enough, Andy Moran has since stepped away. Mickey Graham has come in. Let me know, any Leitrim fans who are watching, like, what are your thoughts on Mickey Graham coming in? Of course, he was the second-hand man to Andy Moran last year, and maybe some would say he's, you know, been the core reason for Leitrim getting promoted, given the fact that in the previous years when he wasn't there, they couldn't make that step up. But overall, a good season for Leitrim. Like, let's not forget Keith Byrne, one of their star players, missing for the entirety of the year. Ryan O'Rourke coming back in, dropping in and out at different times as well. You had some decent players like Darragh Rooney who really stepped up. I think a decent season for Leitrim. It's going to be very interesting though next year in Division 3. Can they stay up? Like, that's going to be the big question. In 24th, I've gone for Offaly, and lads, like, what on earth happened to Offaly this year? Like, to be honest with you, when I was making these power rankings, I was thinking Offaly, you could argue, should nearly be lower. Like, I mean, Limerick beat them in the championship, in the Tailteann Cup, so there could be an argument that Offaly should be lower. But I just think, like, they did stay up in the league, and like, it's so interesting. Like, Declan Kelly, obviously their manager, won the under-20 All-Ireland a couple of years ago. They've got a couple of those players in there, like Jack Bryant, Cormac Egan's obviously in there as well. You've got Keith O'Neill, who I think is a very, very good footballer. Scored some cracking points against the Dubs in Croke Park. But, like, it just, I don't know what happened in that Tailteann Cup. And I think, like, there has to be an inquest within Offaly football to understand what happened and that it does not happen again. Because this Offaly team, like, no disrespect, they're better than London, they're better than Limerick. They should have been getting out of that group in the Tailteann Cup, in my opinion. This was a side a couple of years ago that were in Division 2 and probably should have stayed up. So, like, I think Offaly football overall needs to sort of get its act together a little bit. You have good players, you have good young players, and if you're not careful next year, those young players could leave, and then all of a sudden, Offaly could drop into Division 4. So next year is a big, big year for Offaly. Very disappointing season by their own standards. 24th. In Wicklow, it's 23rd, and like Wicklow, like did get relegated. Offaly did stay up, but I think the reason why I have Wicklow above Offaly is the fact that, look, they beat Westmeath in the Leinster Championship, which was very, very impressive. And of course, as well, they nearly beat Kildare. And like, you think of that chance at the end of that game versus Kildare. They were within a kick of a ball, maybe even a correct pass away from getting into a first Leinster semi-final, I think, since the turn of the century. Like, that would have been absolutely extraordinary from a Wicklow perspective. Dean Healy has been the man really shooting the lights out for Wicklow over the last couple of seasons. Looking like Oisin McConville's going to stick around for another year, which I think is important for Wicklow. And you certainly would have them as one of the front runners for Division 4 next year. In 22nd, it is Antrim. And to be fair to Antrim, like, they're under Andy McEntee, they certainly have had some very good results. Like, they stayed up again, obviously, in Division 3. It probably was a little bit closer than they would have anticipated after quite an impressive start to the league, when it was looking like maybe Antrim would go on and push for promotion. But like, I think overall in 22nd, I think Antrim will be fairly happy with that. It's hard to know, like, under Andy McEntee, like, will they be able to progress next year, or are they happy to just sort of stick in and around this level? Like, as long as they're not dropping down to Division 4, are they happy with that? It's going to be interesting. But to be fair, semi-finalists in the Tailteann Cup in back-to-back seasons, I think that's very impressive. And I do think Andy McEntee's job, like, I was never convinced by Andy McEntee coming into Antrim, I'll be perfectly honest, but I think I've been proven wrong, to be honest, because he's done a very, very decent job there. Ryan McQuillan, very good footballer, very impressed with him against Down. You've obviously got Ryan Murray in there as well. And yeah, decent season for Antrim. 22nd. 21st is Kildare, and kind of, yeah, it feels out of place putting Kildare this low, but on the basis of how poor their season was, I don't think you can justify having them any higher than this. And to be honest with you, some would say, they could probably be even lower. But Kildare had an absolute disastrous season. They lost every game in the league, and like a lot of those games they lost at an absolute canter, never looked like winning. In Leinster, they weren't particularly great either. They scraped past Wicklow, like they should have lost that game as well. In my opinion, they weren't great against Louth and lost. And then in the Tailteann Cup, like a couple of decent performances early on against, I think, Longford and Waterford, but like they were expected to beat them lads. And then they played Laois and like they lost. You know, they got beat in what was their first knockout game in the Tailteann Cup. I think pound for pound, this has to be one of the worst Kildare football seasons in living memory. It definitely is. Brian Flanagan has a huge job on his hands, in all honesty, to really galvanise the county, because they have good players. Like, they have good young footballers. Like, Jimmy Hoyland is a cracking player. You've got Daniel Flynn, who's obviously still knocking about. Kevin Feely, despite how bad of a year it was for Kildare, had a very, very good year. So Kildare are in 21st, but mark my words, they should be higher, and they can be higher next year if they kick on. But at the same time, so many teams, like, usually hit rock bottom. And, like, for me, it's like, is this rock bottom for Kildare, or can it get even worse next year? That's going to be the interesting thing. But yeah, Glenn Ryan's obviously out the door. Brian Flanagan comes in, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Kildare next season. In 20th, it's Laois, and of course for Laois, very good season. Got to the Tailteann Cup final, promoted from Division 4 as well, and like obviously beat Kildare, as we said before, in a very impressive win. What's mad is like the game before that they nearly lost to New York, so this could have been like, these power rankings could have been entirely different had New York got over the line in that match. But I think, to be fair to Laois and to be fair to Justin McNulty, he has done a very, very good job in his first season. He's definitely got the best out of this Laois side. You're seeing the best of players like Paul Kingston. Evan O'Carroll's been very good, and even the likes of Mark Barry has been very impressive as well. And like, even though they lost it down in that final, they made a good fist of it, and it was very competitive, and definitely a lot better than when they had played down in the Tailteann Cup semi-finals last season. And to be honest, like, you do see a lot of teams who go from promotion from Division 4 and then go straight up to Division 2. I don't think it's impossible for Laois. I think they're going to give a really, really good account of themselves in Division 3 next season. In 19th, we've got Clare, and like, to be fair, at the start of the year, nobody was really sure about this Clare side. Like, a lot of people discounting Mark Fitzgerald, a lot of people saying obviously Colm Collins has left. Their, big senior players have obviously left the team as well. But to be fair, a lot of the younger lads and new players that have come in have stepped up, and like, they weren't a million miles off promotion. Very competitive versus Kerry in that Munster final as well. So like, overall, decent season for Clare. 18 is Sligo, and again, like, much like Clare, like Sligo, like, they weren't really discounted at the start of the season, but I think they probably did exceed expectations a little bit. Like, and the big game that stands out for me is that match versus Galway. I mean, goodness me, like, to think Galway went on to reach an All-Ireland final. And I'm not saying that if Sligo had won this game, they would have went on to reach an All-Ireland final or anything like that. I'm not saying that by any stretch of the imagination, but it's mad to think Sligo could have had a win over the All-Ireland finalists. And it goes to show there is something building within Sligo at the moment. Tony McEntee has those lads cooking. Young players are really stepping up, and even some of the more senior players like Patrick O'Connor and Sean Carabine have been very good. So yeah, Sligo, dark horses for promotion next year. 17 is Fermanagh. Look, yes, they were relegated from Division 2, and that would have been certainly something that really would have hurt them. But like, to be fair to Fermanagh, they still had a fairly decent season, like beating Kildare. The draw with Meath, I think, was quite impressive as well. And although things didn't really go according to plan in the Tailteann Cup or in the Ulster Championship, they were never going to do anything in the Ulster Championship anyway, let's be perfectly honest. But yeah, I think for Fermanagh, like, next year in Division 3, like, think of the Division 3 lads, like, it's so even, isn't it? Like, I think Barra and maybe Leitrim, who you could say should be, like, are probably the rank outsiders and massive favourites to be relegated. But the other 7 teams, there's very, very little between a lot of them. And like, it's going to be a bit of a mad year next year, Division 3. 16 is Meath, and like, it is interesting with Meath, because I remember at the start of the season I predicted Meath to get relegated from Division 2, and I took a lot of stick for it, and a lot of Meath fans obviously weren't happy with it. And look, I was wrong. Meath did stay up, but like, what I did say was that I'm not sure about this Meath team under Colm O'Rourke. I just don't really see them progressing. I think there's good young players there, but I just don't think they're maybe as good as what people are thinking. Like, don't get me wrong, Matthew Costello, Jordan Morris, 2 very, very good young players. You've got other lads obviously making the breakthrough from minor as well, from that minor team from a couple of years ago. I worry a bit for Meath next year, to be honest with you, when you look at the quality in Division 2, and like, it's looking like Colm O'Rourke is going to stick around. And I don't know, I just have this feeling of like a bit of a Glen Ryan, Kildare type season for Meath next year. Look, I hope I'm wrong. I know people might think as a Dublin fan that I want Meath to fail. I actually don't. I want Meath to come back. I want the rivalry to be there. But they look very lightweight. They look very out of sorts. And like, when you're looking at them in some of those games in the All-Ireland series, which they knew they were in from the start of the year, they were beaten at an absolute canter, like, in all of those games. Like, so I think that there's worrying signs there for Meath. Those defeats to Louth, like, and Kerry, like, they just were not acceptable in my opinion. 16th overall, but let me know, Meath fans, am I wrong? Maybe Meath fans are a bit more positive than I would be about the county, but overall, yeah, I'm just not really. I think there is good players in Meath. There is potential. There is hope. Owen Frayne this year, who had a very, very good season. Daithí McGowan, Ronan Jones. Like, there is good young players there, but I don't think Colm O'Rourke is getting the best out of them. I think that's my overall opinion, and I think, yeah, I think they need a change in management, in my opinion. But let me know if you disagree. 15th is Westmeath, and interesting enough, like at the time of this recording, Desi Dolan has since stepped down, and it will be interesting to see. Maybe at the time of this recording, Westmeath have a new manager. Massive rumours about Mickey Hart potentially coming in, which is very interesting. And I think for Westmeath, like they are a side that have had more or less the same team over the last couple of years, and there is this sort of thing for Westmeath where do they bring in someone like Mickey Hart, like just to try and get the best out of this side? Like there is rumours that they're going to lose a lot of players next year, like John Heslin, like Ronan O'Toole, like Sam McCartan, like Ray Kennellan. A lot of these players might maybe go travelling. Do you bring in Mickey Hart in to try and keep those lads around and like maximise maybe one last push for these group of players to maybe get to a Leinster final, or maybe do something unknown in Division 2? It's hard to know, to be honest with you, but overall, decent season for Westmeath, promoted from Division 3, competitive enough in the All-Ireland series. So yeah, I think Westmeath will be happy with this year. 14th is Cavan, and look, Cavan had a very solid season from their own perspective. Like, to think about it, promoted up from Division 2. They never really ever looked like getting relegated. They were very comfortable in Division 2. They weren't a million miles off promotion. You look at them in Ulster, like they were a kick of a ball away from beating Tyrone as well. Like they had a very, very good performance that day. I suppose the big one was when Paddy Lynch got injured. Cavan's season just ended there and then, and like they never really ever looked like doing that at all in the All-Ireland series. It was nice for them to be there, but at the same time, they didn't really look like they belonged there. And I suppose that will be the big thing next year for Raymond Galligan and for Cavan, is that can they make them more competitive now against the great, against the big teams? Yes, they were like that against Tyrone, but maybe that was a once-off. So can they do it more consistently? That's the big question. In 13th, it is Down, and look, Down did go up as Tailteann Cup champions, or go up. I mean, they won the Tailteann Cup and obviously got promoted from Division 3. They didn't win the Division 3 final, but they did end their very recent bad run of form in finals by winning that Tailteann Cup versus Laois. And look, they've got young lads obviously coming through, like Ora Murdoch's very good, Oisin Savage is very good, Pat Haveren's been around for a couple of years and sort of shooting the lights out. And I think Conor Laverty has this Down team cooking at the moment. But the big thing is, we see teams in Ulster sort of, we saw Ulster teams rise from the ashes a little bit in the last couple of years. Derry have obviously done so. Armagh, to a certain extent, have obviously done so as well. And when I mean a certain extent, I mean Armagh, it was probably 4 or 5 years ago when they started to come up, and it eventually culminated in an All-Ireland. Derry, similar, and they obviously went on to win Ulster titles. Can Down do something similar? The idea of them winning an All-Ireland seems mental, but then again, the idea of Armagh winning the All-Ireland 5-6 years ago sounded mental as well. So like for Down, it's going to be a long project, but it's going to be very interesting watching them now over the next few years. 12th is Monaghan, and I do think, like, if you were to do a power rankings at the end of last season versus today, I think Monaghan might have been one of the teams who have dropped the furthest, in my opinion, because Monaghan, All-Ireland semi-finalists last year, very, very competitive throughout Ulster as well, beating Tyrone. It was just a very, very bad season, and I think Vinnie Corey just couldn't really ever stop the rot. And I think the problem with Monaghan was that, like, yes, people look at aging players, yes, people look at, Conor McManus and your Kieran and Darren Hughes, and yes, they had injuries, but even some of the younger lads who, like, were knocking around the last couple of seasons didn't really step up this year. Like, Micheál Bannigan looked like an absolute world beater versus Dublin in the opening game of the league, and then he just seemed to drop off a cliff. And like for Monaghan, a lot of the time they weren't just getting beat, they were getting beat comfortably. And like you look at their performance in the All-Ireland series as well. Like, to be fair, they were all right against Galway, but like against Louth, they were a little bit lucky. They were hammered by Kerry, and they just about got over the line against Meath in the end as well. So I think overall for Monaghan, they'll be very disappointed with their season, and it's going to be interesting to see, like, is this the end of an era for Monaghan, or can they come back next year in Division 2? It's going to be interesting. 11th is Cork. Cork did have some very good seasons, or very good performances this season, most notably that win versus Donegal in the All-Ireland group stages. And I think it's going to be interesting for Cork, obviously, going into next season. Can they make that step up? Like, they're one of them teams that you feel like they have the potential. They have a very good core group of players. McGuire, solid midfielder, in my opinion. And then you look at their forward line of Brian Hurley, Stephen Sherlock. Like, they've got some great players in there, Cork. It's just, can they make that step up? Like, the defeat to Louth would have really hurt them, I think, in my opinion. And like, it's interesting with Cork. Like, some good performances, competitive against Kerry, but they're just not doing it enough on a consistent basis. And also the thing about Cork, like, you look at them in the league, at one stage they nearly look like they were going to get relegated. So I think the thing for Cork now, in my opinion, is build more consistency, especially against the weaker teams, because that's when it always seems to be when they struggle. But when they play the better teams, they tend to actually do quite well. So I think that's something Cork will need to focus on for next season. And speaking of Louth, it is them in 10th. Very good season for Louth, and overall for Ger Brennan. Like, taking over from Mickey Hart, people writing Louth off, predicting them to get relegated. Thankfully enough, I got a lot of things wrong this year, but I didn't predict them to get relegated. I thought they would still carry on a bit of form, but even at that, I didn't expect them to actually look as good as they did at times this year. Like, they were only 4 points off Dublin in the Leinster final. All-Ireland quarter finalists, they hit 18 points versus Donegal. Sam Mulroy is obviously a standout player, but shout out to Craig Lennon and Conor Grimes, who both had fantastic seasons. Tommy Dernan as well. And like, Ger Brennan looking like he's going to stick around with Louth for next season. And it's going to be interesting to see, like, can Louth, could they, like, I don't think they're a million miles off pushing for promotion next year. So yeah, very good season for Louth. In 9th, we have Roscommon. And look, I'd be very interested to hear from Roscommon fans. I know there's plenty of Roscommon fans who watch this channel. Do you think this year was progress? Like, yes, you made an All-Ireland quarter-final and happy days. Like, you lost in the end to the All-Ireland champions, so it probably looks even better on paper. But overall for Roscommon, relegated from Division 1, like, they had some good moments. Like, they had some good performances here and there. They weren't a million miles off beating Mayo once or twice. This year, obviously, when they played them, they actually got further than Mayo in the championship as well. But overall for the Rossies, it's like, again, like, they have some very good players. Cathal Heenan had an outstanding season. Connor Cox looked more like his old self at different times as well. German Murtha obviously had a very, very decent season for Roscommon as well. But it's just one of them things where, like, for the Rossies, they got to the quarterfinal. It was progress on paper because of obviously losing in, the final 12 the year before. But again, it's like, it's much like the Cork debate and some other teams. Like, can they make that step up now? Can they progress? Like, even seeing Armagh win the All-Ireland would have been interesting, I think, from a Roscommon point of view. Because for years, I felt like Roscommon and Armagh were very, very similar. Like, they were at a similar level. And you'd even argue, like, 4 years ago, Roscommon were probably, like, at a higher level than Armagh. So it's interesting, all right. But I think for Roscommon, you put them in 9th. Be interesting to see now, like, with Davy Burke next season. 3rd year, pressure will be on. In 8th, we have Tyrone. Tyrone were beaten in the final 12 of the All-Ireland, and they do get in the top 8. But I think for Tyrone, it's like, they're a team that for me has a lot of potential. A lot of young lads coming through, some very, very good forwards in Dara Canvan. I'm not convinced by the management. Like, fair enough, Fergal Logan, obviously, we all wish him the best of luck, obviously, in his battle, in his health battle at the moment. So I'm not putting him into this same bracket. But Brian Dooher, overall, like, I don't really know if they're progressing under the current management structure, to be honest with you. And I do think maybe there needs to be a change. I've said this over the last couple of years. Like, I think Tyrone, like, they won an All-Ireland, obviously, back in 2021. But since then, they haven't come, like, anywhere near an All-Ireland. They've had a few decent performances here and there. But overall, like, they just don't look like the same team from a couple of years ago. And you're looking at some of the key players like Peter Hart, Kieran McGeary, Darren McCurry. I just don't think we saw the best out of them this year. And it was more about Dara Canavan, Kieran Daly, Niall Devlin, the younger lads making the step up. So yeah, like, an interesting couple of years ahead for Tyrone in the sense of, do they stick with the current management structure or do they change? It's going to be interesting. 7th is Mayo. Mayo were beaten at the same stage of, like, same as Tyrone. Obviously, they were beaten by Derry in the final 12. Like, Mayo, again, like with Kevin McStay, it's like they seem like they're quite static at the moment. I don't think they're getting worse, but I don't think they're getting better. And it's one of them where I don't think they're a million miles off going on a run and getting to an All-Ireland semi-final or a final. And especially when you look at how open the All-Ireland Championship was this year with Armagh going and winning it. Like, I think Mayo would look at that and think, if they can do it, then surely maybe we can do it in the next couple of years. To be fair, I think a lot of teams will be thinking that. But I think for Mayo, like, the difference between, like, teams like Armagh and Mayo is that Mayo, for me, like, defensively, they always look like they're all over the place. They seem to only ever play the one way, which is a running game. They don't seem to hang on to the ball like other teams. And I think going forward, like, Ryan O'Donoghue is a top class forward. I think Jordan Flynn is very good as well. I think Matthew Ruan is very good in midfield. but they don't really have much else. Like Tommy Conroy has had a lot of injury problems in and out, very good runner of the ball, but hasn't really excelled in the way that Mayo fans would have wanted him to. And in the last couple of seasons, you just haven't really seen much else. Like, they have a few good, like, kind of trendy forwards here and there, but no, like, killers. And that's what you need. Like, you look at Armagh winning the All-Ireland, they had killers in the final third. And, like, Mayo just don't have enough of them at the moment. So, yeah, I've got them in 7th. Like, they're, like, with a lot of the teams in and around, like, the top 5 or top 6, they're not a million miles off, but next year for Kevin McStay is a big one, because if they don't get beyond the quarter-final, then, like, there'll just be massive questions asked, I think. In 6th, we've gone for Derry, and, like, it's interesting with Derry. Like, when you look at it, they had a very bad championship season. They lost to Armagh, they lost to Galway, they lost to Donegal as well. They had 3 championship defeats, actually 4 when you count the defeat to Kerry, of course, which ultimately knocked them out in the All-Ireland quarterfinals. Their performances were very bad in pretty much all the games. The only... Like, ironically, their performance against Donegal, I don't think, was that bad. And their performance against Mayo, I think it got better the more and more that game went on. And I think it was that win, really, that has them above Mayo in the power rankings for me. The Mickey Hart experiment failed, there's no doubt about that. But, like, they did win the league, and I think the league should count for something. And at times in the league, they were very, very good. Conor Glass, excellent season at different times. Brendan Rodgers, very good. You can't discount Owen McAvoy as well, who scored 2 goals in that league final, had an outstanding season, and obviously was injured at different times. Garrett McKinless was in and out through injury and then through his own stupidity as well. So, like, it was a very unusual season for Derry. But again, I don't think they're a million miles off, but their next manager is going to be very interesting. Like, do they go back to Rory Gallagher, which a lot of people would not be happy with, and I can completely understand why, but there does seem to be a lot of rumours about him potentially coming in at the moment? Or do they go for, like, a Malachi O'Rourke, or even do they go left field again? Like, it's going to be interesting, because Derry, like, their team is ready now to kick on and win an All-Ireland, and, like, they kind of need to, like, at least get to a final in the next couple of years. And if they don't do so, they'll look back at these, like, last couple of years as a massive, massive waste. So, yeah, Derry in 6th. 5th is Dublin. Overall, as a Dublin fan, look, it was a disappointing season. There's no other way about it. Our first All-Ireland quarter-final defeat since 2009. In the Leinster final, we weren't great as well. Like, I think there is an argument that, like, a lot more of the senior players are slowing down, like Cluxton, James McCarthy. Jack McCaffrey was good at different points, but didn't start regularly. He did start against Galway, and I don't think he looked great. Like, you've got a lot of players there, like Colin Pascal probably didn't have as good a season this year as last year. You do have some young players that are looking good, like Killy McGuinness, I think, looks very good. But overall, it's just hard to know with Dublin. We're not the same team that we were, obviously, when we won that 6 in a row. But again, we're not a million miles off. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Dublin kick on and win an All-Ireland next year. It could happen, you know, and I think there's very little between a lot of the teams. But I do think the days of Dublin dominance, winning 2-3 in a row, you know, I think they're a good bit away in terms of, we'll see what's happening with the younger crop at the moment, if, you know, we can generate a team from that. But overall, from a Dublin perspective, it was a very disappointing season. I have Dublin in 5th. Look, we won the All-Ireland last year. We got to a league final. Still a very, like, not a very good season. Still a very good team, I think, is what I'm trying to say. But overall, for the quality that Dublin have, it was a disappointing season, in my opinion. In 4th, it's Donegal. Some should argue Donegal maybe should be above Kerry, who I have in 3rd. But I do think from a Donegal perspective, like, they won an Ulster title, outstanding season, and got to an All-Ireland semi-final. Like, for Jim McGuinness in particular, like, they would have, I honestly think he would have bitten your hand off for the season that they had. Like, getting to winning an Ulster title, getting promoted, winning the Division 2 title, and then obviously going on to an All-Ireland semi-final. The only thing some people would look back at it and say, like, was there a bit of a missed opportunity because, you know, Kerry got beat in one of the semi-finals, because Dublin got beat in a quarter-final. Like, maybe there was an opportunity there. Like, if Donegal had beaten Galway, a lot of people probably would have fancied them against Armagh. And look, you can't take anything away from Armagh. Armagh beat Galway. Maybe they would have beat Donegal. We honestly don't know. But overall, Donegal, they might just look back, like, at that All-Ireland semi-final with a little bit of regret. They missed a lot of big chances going down the home stretch. But at the same time, a solid season, and put them in 4th. And, like, again, like Jim McGuinness in his first season in Donegal, in his first spell, you know, he won an Ulster title. He got them to an All-Ireland semi-final. A year later, they went on and won it. Can they do it again? Like, I'd be curious to know what people think. And in third, it is Kerry. Look, overall, Kerry, like, they did, they were All Ireland finalists last year, All Ireland winners the year before. Like, they still are a very, very good side. I know some people like to discount or discredit Kerry and everything else. And look, as a Dublin fan, there's probably no better man to do it, in all honesty. But, like, they still are a top team. Like, they still have probably the best forward, best player in the country, most talented player in the country in David Clifford. Tom O'Sullivan had an outstanding season as well from a Kerry perspective. I think the problem with Kerry, though, it is the age-old question, like, outside of Clifford, do you have enough around them in the big games? I'm not too sure that you do. Like, I think Paddy Clifford is a creator. He's a man who will set things up. I think Sean O'Shea, like, he is a scorer, but again, it's like he's probably more of a creator himself as well and more of a Kieran Kilkenny type player. And he's not the type of player who's going to score 7-8 points a game, from play. So that's the problem probably that Kerry have. And look, overall, they got done for physicality against Armagh. I think Armagh were stronger than them. They had more heart than them. But again, like, they're not a million miles off. And like, if someone was to turn around to me and say that Kerry will win the All-Ireland next year, and they listed all the reasons why that I've just spoke about, I would probably say, yeah, that's a fair opinion. So I've got Kerry in third. Definitely some question marks over certain performances, and maybe, like, when I think more about it, Donegal should actually be ahead of them on the basis of winning that Ulster title, but I'm going to stick with Kerry in third. And then we do have our top two, and look, there is no surprise that it is the two teams who are in the All-Ireland final, both Galway and Armagh, and it probably is no surprise that Armagh are number one, and I don't think you can discredit that given that they won the All-Ireland. But look, first of all, speaking of Galway in second, look, Galway, like, there'll obviously be a lot of regret about that final, and I think there'll be more regret about that final than the final versus Kerry, mainly just because they missed so many chances going down the home stretch, when they'd been super clinical really against Donegal in the semi-finals, and they were, like, when they needed to score against Dublin in the quarters, they did, and their big players all stood up. Like, Shane Walsh was absolutely outstanding in that quarter final against Donegal. You got the best from players like Robert Finnerty and Paul Conroy. And then in the final, like, Paul Conroy outstanding in the first half. Robert Finnerty goes off injured. And then in the second half, it was like their bigger players just failed to get going. Matthew Tierney ends up getting substituted. He was very quiet. Damien Comer was very quiet. Shane Walsh was dropping chances short. But overall, in the grand scheme of things, like, I think if you had said to Galway fans at the start of the year, you'll win a Connacht title in the way that you did against Mayo, scoring loads of late points. You'll stay up in Division 1. You'll have one or two scares in Division 1, but you'll stay up. And then in the Championship, you'll beat Dublin, you'll beat Donegal, and you'll be essentially within a kick of a ball of, forcing that All-Ireland final to a replay or to a draw, or, to extra time. I think Galway fans would have took it, in my opinion. And, like, when you look at the age profile of this Galway team, the age profile is still very good. Yes, Walsh and Comer are getting on, but I think there are other players coming through, and it's about those other players now. It's about your Tom O'Callaghan's. Can these players now step up on a regular basis and kick Galway on even further? Because if they can, there is an All-Ireland in this Galway team in the next couple of years. I'm very, very sure of it. But in at number one, it is Armagh, and it can't be discounted. Look, they won the All-Ireland, and, I've been saying for a number of years now, I know some people, like, were giving me a lot of stick maybe for some of my predictions about Armagh this year. But, like, if we go back a couple of years ago to 2022, I made a video talking about how the potential was in this Armagh team, and the main thing that I always felt that was holding them back, like, and again, it's going to sound a little bit silly now, but was McGeeney. I honestly thought McGeeney was holding them back a little bit, just because of the fact that they looked like they were being overly cautious. It looked like they weren't taking their game to teams. It looked like they were passing the ball from side to side, not taking enough risks. But to be fair to Geezer and to be fair to Armagh and to give them 100% of the credit, from the quarterfinals onwards, they went after teams. They went on the front foot. They got after Kerry. They got in behind them. They created chances, and they won the All-Ireland because of it. Like, and one thing that stood out in that final versus Galway for me were being overly cautious. They were the ones keeping the ball. They were the ones with the majority of the possession. But when Armagh had the ball, they went for it. And even that chance at the end, where I think it's Ross McQuillan maybe who comes on and hits the post. Or it might have even been Stephen Campbell. Like, they probably should have kept the ball in that instance, but the fact that they're now going for it a bit more, they're taking more risks, and You know, I've always felt like this Armagh side, since I saw them beat Dublin in the league, I was always like, this is a team that can go and win trophies, win major trophies, win an All-Ireland. But it's just unusual because usually you win an Ulster title before you win an All-Ireland. Usually you win a league title before you win an All-Ireland. And Armagh kept on losing major finals, you know, and there's no getting away from that. But this year it changed. They won the All-Ireland. They got over the line, and fully deservedly so as well. And the thing is, like, winning back-to-back All-Irelands is a very, very hard thing to do. I think it's only been done twice since the turn of the century, and that was Kerry, I think, in, was it 08, 09 maybe potentially, or 06, 07 I think it was, and obviously Dublin's 6 in a row spell, obviously, as well, from 2014 up until 2020. But, like, again, they're not a million miles off, and you wouldn't discount them. Like, if someone said to me now, Armagh will win the All-Ireland next year, it wouldn't be that big of a surprise, I don't think, you know? So, like, they're, you know, the fact they've actually now won a trophy and got over the line, like, they'll be so hungry to win that Ulster title as well. But anyway, they're my power rankings. You will see them on screen right there now, and I'll read them all out before we finish up. So, in 33, it is New York, 32 is London, 31 Tipperary, 30 is Waterford, 29 is Carlow, 28 is Longford, 27 is Wexford, 26 is Limerick, 25 is Leitrim, 24th is Offaly, 23rd is Wicklow, 22nd is Antrim, 21st is Kildare, 20th is Laois, 19th is Clare, 18th is Sligo, 17th is Fermanagh, 16th is Meath, 15th is Westmeath, 14th is Cavan, 13th is Down, 12th is Monaghan, 11th is Cork, 10th is Louth, 9th is Roscommon, 8th is Tyrone, 7th is Mayo, 6th is Derry, 5th is Dublin, 4th is Donegal, 3rd is Kerry, and 2nd is Galway, and 1st is Armagh. Let me know in the comments down below what you disagree with, because I'm sure there will be disagreements on these. And if you could hit the like button and subscribe, regardless of whether you agree or disagree. If you enjoy the content, then, you know, subscribe. It is completely free. So, yeah, cheers anyone who tuned in. We will be dropping a Hurling Power Rankings and the Hurling Team of the Year video in the next couple of days, so stay tuned for that. But until the next one, speak to you all soon.